Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're taking a look at AI models.
Specifically, how they handle your data.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, especially in the EU,
We're going to be focusing on this recent opinion document from the EDPB,
the European Data Protection Board.
making sure everything follows the GDPR.
Right, the GDPR.
So this document, it asks some pretty interesting questions.
Like, can AI ever be truly anonymous?
Yeah.
Even if it was trained on personal data?
Mm.
What if that data was used unlawfully in the first place?
Right.
And how do our rights as data subjects
All those individual rights.
play into all of this?
Exactly.
So many questions.
Okay.
It's a bit of a puzzle.
It is. Before we jump into all that, though,
Yeah,
could you give us just a quick overview of what AI models even are?
sure. So,
Like, why are they suddenly everywhere?
well, think about like the
Yeah.
chatbot you might have talked to on a website,
Mm-hmm.
or how Netflix suggests what to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Even like the system your bank uses to flag a suspicious transaction.
Oh, right.
Those are all powered by AI models.
So they're like
Yeah.
super smart computer programs
Yeah, basically.
that learn from data and then use that knowledge to do things.
They learn from these huge data sets.
Okay.
And the EDPB, they're really interested in models that are trained on personal data.
Okay, makes sense. That's where the privacy concerns.
Exactly, because that's where things get a little tricky
Right.
from a data protection perspective.
So let's say an AI model was trained on data that included my info.
Mm-hmm.
Is it ever really anonymous?
That's the big question, and the EDPB says it's not a simple yes or no answer.
Okay.
It really depends on the context.
Yeah.
Imagine baking a cake
Okay.
where each ingredient is like a little bit of personal data.
I like this analogy.
Yeah, so even if you can't see the individual ingredients in the final cake,
Mm-hmm.
they're still there. They contributed to the flavor.
Oh, so you're saying that even if the model doesn't
Right.
spit out my name or address,
Right?
it's possible that traces of that original data
Yeah,
still be in there?
Like hidden ingredients.
Oh, interesting.
And researchers have developed techniques to try and extract this training data.
Oh, wow.
It's often called a membership inference attack.
So, like, digital detectives can actually reverse engineer these AI models?
Yeah,
Potentially uncover the data they were trained on.
exactly.
Wow, that's scary.
So the EDPB, they provide these criteria to evaluate whether a model is really anonymous.
Right.
They look at how likely it is to extract personal data,
Uh-huh.
what methods could be used,
Okay.
and whether the model's output reveals any personal info.
So, like a checklist?
Yeah, like a checklist for anonymity.
Okay.
But remember, context matters.
Right, you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
How does that play into it?
Well, imagine a publicly available AI model
Okay.
that anyone can mess with
Mm-hmm.
versus one a company uses internally.
Okay. Yeah.
The risks are different.
Right, anyone could try to.
Yeah, because in the public model, anyone could try to extract data from it. Right. It makes sense. Okay, so let's say a company wants to train an AI model using personal data.
Mm-hmm.
Can they just say, like, we have a legitimate interest in doing this?
Well, legitimate interest is one of the legal bases under the GDPR.
Okay.
But it's not just a free pass.
Right.
The EDPB has a whole section in their opinion dedicated to this.
Could you just remind us quickly what legitimate interest means
Sure.
in the context of the GDPR?
Yeah, so it means a company can process personal data
Okay.
if they have a genuine and lawful reason to do so,
Okay.
as long as it doesn't override your fundamental rights and freedoms.
Right. So it's
Just-
all about balance.
It's about finding that right balance, yeah.
Yeah.
So if a company wants to use legitimate interest to justify training an AI model,
Mm-hmm.
like what hoops do they have to jump through?
Well, the EDPB outlines this three-step test.
Okay.
First, they have to demonstrate a genuine and lawful interest in processing your data.
So they can't just
Yeah.
make something up.
Exactly.
Okay, what's the second step? They need to prove that processing your data is necessary
Okay.
to achieve that interest.
Okay.
And this is where it gets interesting.
Okay.
They have to show there are no less intrusive alternatives
Oh.
that would achieve the same goal
Okay. So
without using your personal data.
it's not enough to have a valid reason.
Right.
They have to show
They've exhausted other options.
or exhausted other options. Yeah. Okay.
That wouldn't involve your personal data.
and then
And then comes the third step,
okay.
arguably the most crucial one.
What's that?
They have to demonstrate that their legitimate interest in using your data
Uh-huh.
outweighs the potential risks to your fundamental rights and freedoms.
What kind of rights are we talking about here?
Well, think about your right to privacy,
Okay.
but it goes beyond that.
Okay.
We're talking about freedom of expression, non-discrimination, security.
Okay.
Even your mental health AI models could impact all of these.
Wow. I never really thought about it that way. Could you give us an example?
Yeah.
Like, of how an AI model could potentially infringe on someone's rights?
Let's say a company develops an AI model to help with medical diagnoses.
Okay.
Sounds great, right?
Yeah.
But what if the model was trained on biased data?
Oh.
It might discriminate against certain groups of people when making predictions about their health.
Wow.
Violating their right to non-discrimination.
Scary.
Yeah, and that's why the EDPB puts so much emphasis on this balancing act. Companies can't just assume their interests trump your rights.
Right.
They have to consider the impact
Yeah.
on individuals and show that their legitimate interest is strong enough to justify the risks.
So it's about protecting us from potential harm.
Protecting individuals from potential harm.
Yeah, even if that harm isn't intentional.
Right, even if it's unintentional.
The EDPB also talks about this concept of reasonable expectations. What does that mean exactly?
So this means you should be able to reasonably anticipate how your data might be used.
So if a company's use of my data goes way beyond what I would normally expect, that's a problem.
That could be a red flag.
Okay, and this ties back into transparency.
Exactly. Companies need to be upfront about how they're using your data to train and deploy AI models.
That's right. No more hiding behind.
Right, no hiding behind vague terms or burying it in these long privacy policies.
That nobody reads.
That nobody reads.
So it's about
being open and honest.
Being open and honest.
About what's happening behind the scenes.
Okay, now, you mentioned earlier that web scraping is another area where this comes into play. So could you explain what web scraping is?
Sure. So imagine this giant vacuum cleaner sucking up huge amounts of data from websites, social media, online forums, basically anywhere information is public. That's web scraping.
Okay, I can see why the EDPB might be a little concerned about that.
Yeah, because we're talking about
a lot of data.
A lot of personal data. Floating around out there.
Right, and people might not even realize.
And a lot of times people don't even realize it's being gathered.
Right.
They haven't given consent.
They haven't given their consent.
And they might not be aware of how that data is being used to train these AI models.
Yeah, so that's kind of
it's a bit of a gray area.
A gray area. Yeah, ethically speaking.
Yeah.
What does the EDPB recommend companies do to avoid issues?
Well, they recommend some safeguards. First, respect the rules. Some websites explicitly forbid scraping in their terms of service. Or even like with robots.txt files. You know? Companies need to pay attention to these.
It's like
and avoid scraping sites that have said they don't want their content collected.
No trespassing sign.
Exactly, like a no trespassing sign. Then there are opt-out mechanisms. Some websites allow people to opt out of having their data scraped. And companies need to honor those choices and make sure they have systems in place to exclude that data.
So it's not just about avoiding
the
no trespassing signs.
It's also about respecting people's wishes.
It's also about respecting people's wishes,
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, transparency is crucial. Companies need to be upfront about how they're using scraped data and what steps they're taking to protect privacy.
So transparency is a big theme here.
It is a big theme.
It's about building trust.
It's about building trust.
And being accountable for how data is being used.
Exactly.
Now, speaking of accountability, the EDPB opinion also addresses what happens if data was used unlawfully to train an AI model.
They outline 3 different scenarios.
Okay, we're going to have to save those for part 2 of our deep dive.
Yeah, we'll have to save those.
But I'm really curious to hear about those.
We've covered a lot of ground already.
But there's so much more to explore.
There is.
To our listener, we'll be back soon to dive deeper into those scenarios, what they mean for you.
For you.
Until then, keep those detective hats on.
Yeah. Welcome back. We're ready to dig into those scenarios.
Yes, those unlawful data scenarios.
Where personal data might have been used to train an AI.
Yeah.
Unlawfully, so are you ready to put your detective hat back on?
I am. I'm ready. Let's hear that first scenario.
Okay, so the first scenario is when the same company
Okay.
that originally processed the data unlawfully continues to use it in the AI model.
So they're basically just like
they're trying to sweep it under the rug,
Yeah.
hope nobody notices.
doubling down.
Yeah. What does the EDPB say about that?
What do they say?
Well, they say it depends.
Okay.
They stress the importance of looking at it case by case.
Okay.
So just because the initial data collection was unlawful
Right.
doesn't automatically mean that everything after that is tainted. They have to look at the circumstances
Okay.
and determine whether the development and deployment phases
Right.
are separate.
Right. So it's not
black and white.
not black and white.
Yeah.
There are nuances.
What about that second scenario?
Okay, so in the second scenario,
What happens if a different company buys the model
yeah.
without knowing about the unlawful data?
Right, potentially without knowing.
Yeah.
This is where things get really interesting.
Yeah, sure.
Here, the EDPB focuses on the accountability of the acquiring company.
Okay.
So they should have done their due diligence.
It's like a background check.
Yeah, like a background check for the AI model.
Like the AI.
They need to make sure the model they're buying
Right.
wasn't built on bad data.
Right.
And this is especially important
Okay.
if there's been a previous finding of infringement
Okay.
by a supervisory authority or a court.
So it's really
It's like buying a used car.
buyer beware.
You want to make sure it doesn't have any hidden problems.
Exactly. So let's say a company unknowingly buys a model trained on this bad data. What happens then?
Well, that's where the supervisory authorities we talked about
Right.
come in.
Okay.
They have the power to intervene
Right.
if there's a finding of infringement.
So they can step in and say, hey, you need to stop using this model.
Exactly. They can say, hey, stop using this model.
Okay.
It was built on bad data.
And they can issue fines and stuff.
They issue fines.
Right.
They can order the deletion of data.
Right.
And even demand the deletion of the whole AI model in some cases.
Really?
Yeah, it's like hitting the reset button.
Wow. Okay, so they're not
messing around.
They're not messing around when it comes to data protection.
No, they're serious.
That's good to know.
They're sending a clear message that unlawful data use won't be tolerated,
Right.
even in the AI world.
Okay.
Now, what about the third scenario?
Okay, the third one, what was that?
What if the model is successfully anonymized
Okay.
after the unlawful processing? So they try to fix it after the fact.
Right, they try to fix it afterwards.
Does that get them off the hook?
Well, the EDPB says if it can be proven that the model no longer processes personal data,
Okay.
then the GDPR doesn't apply.
Okay.
It's like the data has been scrubbed clean.
Right.
There's no trace
Of that original.
Yeah, of the original unlawful processing.
So they can escape consequences
Potentially.
if they manage to successfully anonymize it.
If they can anonymize the model effectively.
Right. But how do we know if the anonymization is truly successful?
Right.
Like, remember those digital detectives that you were talking about?
Simply claiming anonymization isn't enough.
Right.
It needs to stand up to scrutiny.
Okay.
And this is where those criteria we talked about for evaluating anonymity come back into play.
Okay.
They need to demonstrate that the model doesn't reveal personal info,
Right.
that it's unlikely to extract personal data, and so on.
So it's not a get-out-of-jail-free card.
It's not a free pass.
The anonymization has to be done.
It has to be done properly.
Properly.
Yeah. Rigorously.
Okay, now shifting gears a little bit.
Okay.
I want to talk about accountability from a different angle. With traditional software,
Yeah.
you can usually trace the code,
Right.
figure out what went wrong.
Right.
But AI models are kind of like these black boxes,
Yeah.
right? They're learning and evolving in ways that even the people who created them
Yeah.
don't fully understand.
You've hit on a crucial point.
Yeah.
This opacity of AI models adds another layer
Of complexity.
to accountability.
Yeah.
It's like trying to solve a mystery
Right.
where the clues are constantly changing.
How do we determine who's responsible then?
Right.
When an AI model makes a bad decision,
That's a big question.
that hurts someone.
Right.
Is it the developer of the model,
It's a tough one.
the company deploying it,
Yeah.
or even the model itself, like some people argue?
Those are some really
Yeah.
mind-boggling questions.
They are.
And there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
The legal and ethical frameworks are still trying to catch up
To technology.
with AI.
Right.
But documents like this EDPB opinion
Okay.
are important steps.
Yeah.
They're forcing us to confront these tough questions and start thinking about solutions.
Now, are there any, like, technological solutions that could help reduce these data protection risks?
Absolutely.
We talked about anonymization.
Yeah.
But are there other tools we can use?
There's a whole area of research dedicated to this.
Okay.
It's called privacy-preserving machine learning,
Okay.
One promising technique is differential privacy.
Okay, what's that?
It's like adding static to a radio signal.
Okay.
You can still hear the music, but it's harder to make out the individual instruments.
So they're adding noise.
Yeah, they're adding noise to the data.
To the data, to make it harder to extract that individual information.
To make it harder to extract that individual information.
Okay, harder to extract that individual information.
Yeah, that's clever. Yeah, it's a clever approach.
Are there any other techniques like that?
Another approach is federated learning.
Okay.
So instead of gathering all the data in one place,
Right.
the model is trained on these decentralized data sets.
Okay.
It's like having a team of chefs
Okay.
working on different parts of a recipe in separate kitchens,
Okay.
and then combining their effort
I say that analogy.
to create the final dish.
That sounds like a good way to protect privacy.
Yeah, it's a great way to protect privacy.
But I imagine there are trade-offs.
There are always trade-offs.
Right. Maybe these privacy-preserving techniques
Right.
make the models less accurate
Yeah, they could make them less accurate.
or less efficient.
We're less efficient.
Right.
But as research progresses,
Okay.
we're seeing better and better techniques
Okay.
that minimize these trade-offs.
So it's all about finding that right balance.
It's all about finding the right recipe.
I see what you did there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think beyond the technical solutions,
Mhm.
education and awareness are really important.
They're crucial.
Right.
Yeah.
Individuals need to understand how their data is being used.
Absolutely.
And companies need to prioritize
Ethical AI development.
ethical AI development. Right.
Yes.
So it's a multi-pronged approach.
It's a multifaceted approach.
Now, circling back to the EDPB's opinion.
Yeah.
One thing that struck me was their emphasis on web scraping.
Mm-hmm.
They dedicate a whole section to it.
They do.
Why do you think they place so much importance on that?
Well, I think it's because web scraping brings up a lot of these data protection concerns.
Okay.
It involves collecting vast amounts of data, often without people's knowledge or consent.
Right, from those public sources.
Yeah, from those public sources.
And the stuff being scraped can be really personal,
Yeah.
sensitive.
We're talking about social media posts, forum discussions,
Yeah.
even comments on news articles.
It's like a digital fingerprint
It is like a digital fingerprint.
out there for anyone to collect.
And the EDPB is worried about this data being used in ways that people never intended.
Yeah, in ways they didn't agree to.
Right.
The document mentions the risks of re-identification where seemingly anonymous data
Right.
is combined with other sources to identify people.
That'd be Zach.
And they highlight the potential for discrimination
Yeah.
if that scraped data reflects existing biases,
Right.
which is often the case,
Which,
unfortunately.
unfortunately, it often does.
So it's a mix of privacy risks.
Yeah. It's a mix of privacy and ethical concerns.
And the EDPB is basically saying, hey, companies, you need to be really careful
They're saying tread carefully
when scraping data from the web.
when you're scraping data from the web.
They're not saying it's wrong,
They're not saying it's inherently wrong.
but they're urging companies to put safeguards in place,
to implement safeguards.
like respecting those opt-out mechanisms, excluding sensitive websites,
Right.
being transparent about how they're using the data.
Being transparent about how they're using the data,
All those are important.
those are all essential.
And they specifically mention respecting robots.txt files.
Right.
Can you explain what those are
Sure. So a robots.txt file.
for people who might not be familiar?
Yeah, it's basically a set of instructions
Yeah.
that website owners can use
Okay.
to tell web crawlers and scrapers which parts of their site they can and cannot access.
So it's a way for website owners to have some control
It gives them some control.
over how their content is used.
Yeah.
Okay, so the EDPB is saying companies need to pay attention to those signs
Well, absolutely.
and respect the wishes
Respect the wishes of the website owner.
of the website owners, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they also talk about data minimization,
Right.
only collecting the data that's necessary.
Right. So it's all about
It's all about being responsible.
being responsible.
Yeah. And respectful.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit
Okay.
and talk about the role of individuals in all of this. We've been talking about companies' responsibilities.
Right.
What about our own responsibility
Yeah, that's a great question.
when it comes to protecting our data?
It's easy to feel powerless,
Yeah.
but there are things we can do.
Okay. What can we do?
First, we need to be aware
Okay.
of how our data is being used.
Right.
Reading privacy policies.
Yeah.
Understanding the permissions we give apps.
Right.
Those are essential.
It's like reading the fine print.
It is like reading the fine print
Yeah.
before you sign a contract.
Right.
Not always the most exciting,
No, not always fun.
but it can save you trouble.
It can. Yeah.
And let's be honest, sometimes those privacy policies are so long
They are.
and confusing.
Yeah, it's like they're intentionally trying to,
It's like they're speaking a different language.
yeah, obscure what they're actually doing
Yeah.
with our data.
Exactly.
So we need to pay attention
That's why it's so important to pay attention.
to those key phrases
Yes.
like data sharing,
Look for those key phrases.
third-party access.
Exactly.
Try to understand who they're sharing our data with.
Right. And why?
Yeah.
So it's about being an informed consumer
Yeah, being an informed consumer.
and making conscious choices.
Yeah.
Who we trust.
Okay, and what about exercising our data rights?
Yes.
Like the right to access our data
Mm-hmm.
or have it corrected
Rectification.
or even deleted.
Erasure.
Do those still apply in the AI world?
Absolutely.
I do.
The GDPR still applies.
Okay, good.
Even when our data is used to train AI models,
Okay.
we have the right to know what data they hold,
Uh-huh.
to request corrections if it's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and to demand deletion in certain cases.
So we're not powerless.
You have more power than you think.
We're not at the mercy of these algorithms.
Exactly.
Okay, but how effective are these rights in practice?
Right.
Like if my data is already out there,
Mm-hmm.
being used to train some AI,
Yeah.
can I really put that genie back in the bottle?
It's not always easy,
Okay.
but it's not impossible either.
Okay.
The GDPR gives individuals
Mm-hmm.
real tools to enforce their rights.
Right.
And as more people exercise those rights,
Right.
it puts pressure on companies
Okay.
to be more transparent and accountable.
So it's about shifting that
It's about shifting the balance of power.
balance of power. Yeah. Okay, now,
Yeah.
I want to touch on the potential benefits of AI.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a lot about the risks,
Right. Of course, there are risks.
but these technologies can also do good.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
They have immense potential.
What are some ways AI could make our lives better?
Well, the possibilities are vast.
Okay.
In healthcare, AI could help diagnose diseases earlier,
Wow.
develop personalized treatments,
Okay.
potentially saving lives.
It's incredible.
In transportation, it could optimize traffic flow,
Okay.
make our roads safer.
Mm-hmm.
In education, it could personalize learning,
Okay.
help students reach their full potential.
Wow, so it's like having
It's like having an army of tireless assistants.
an army of assistants.
Yeah.
Helping us solve problems.
Helping us solve problems.
Make better decisions.
And make better decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And in so many other fields, AI could automate tasks,
Right.
freeing up humans
Yeah.
to do more creative and meaningful work.
That's the dream.
It is the dream.
But realizing those benefits depends on responsible AI development.
Exactly. It hinges on responsible AI development.
Right. We need to make sure these technologies are used to help people,
Right. To serve humanity,
not to exploit us.
not to exploit or control us.
Right. So it's about using AI
Using AI for good.
for good.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your biggest takeaway from this EDPB opinion overall?
I think the most important message is that data protection
Okay. Yeah.
is not an afterthought
Right.
in the AI world.
It has to be.
It needs to be baked in.
Baked into the process.
From the beginning to
Right.
the whole development and deployment process.
Yeah, it's not just about complying with the GDPR.
Right.
Wait,
It's about building a culture of respect
Respect.
for privacy and ethical AI.
So it requires like a shift in mindset,
It requires a shift in mindset
both within companies
within companies
and in society as a whole.
and in society as a whole.
We need to move beyond that move fast and break things
Exactly.
mentality.
You need to slow down.
Right. Think critically.
Ask those tough questions.
Ask the tough questions.
Like, what are the consequences?
What are the consequences?
How can we reduce the risks?
How do we mitigate the risk?
And how can we make sure AI is used to make the world a better place?
Exactly.
Those are the questions we need to be asking.
Those are the important questions.
Well said. Okay. I think it's time to wrap up part 2 of our deep dive
Okay.
into AI and data protection.
Sounds good.
But don't worry, we're not done yet.
No, we're not done yet.
We have one more part to go.
We have one more part.
And it's packed with even more insights.
Packed with insights.
Like thought-provoking questions. And more questions.
We'll be back soon to explore reasonable expectations in more detail
We will.
and discuss the global implications of all of this.
The global implications.
So until then,
Yeah.
stay curious, stay informed,
And for.
and keep diving deep.
Keep diving.
Welcome back to our final part of this deep dive into AI and data protection. We've talked about anonymity, accountability, all these complex things. But before we go, I want to circle back to that idea of reasonable expectations we brought up earlier. What would people reasonably expect when it comes to their data and AI?
Yeah, that's a really important point because it goes beyond just like checking the boxes for legal compliance. It's about thinking about the bigger picture, you know? Companies need to consider if what they're doing with data actually aligns with what people would expect. It helps build trust, make sure users feel in control of their data, even with all this powerful tech out there.
Makes sense. I should be able to kind of guess how my data is going to be used, especially with
Mm.
something as sensitive as AI.
Sure.
Any examples of how this might play out in real life?
Oh, yeah, tons. Let's say you're using a fitness tracker, monitoring your steps, trying to reach your fitness goals. You'd expect that data to be used for like personalized recommendations, maybe connect with friends on the app, right?
Right, totally.
But what if they suddenly start using that data to train an AI that predicts health insurance premiums?
Whoa, that's not cool. Feels like a betrayal if I didn't know that was happening.
Exactly. Transparency is key.
Yeah.
Companies need to be upfront about what they're doing, get proper consent when they're going beyond what people expect.
So more than just the rules, it's about respecting people's data, making sure they have a say.
Right.
Okay, before we wrap up, going to zoom out a bit.
Yeah.
This EDPB opinion, it's EU-focused,
Mm.
but this stuff affects everyone, right?
Oh, absolutely. AI is everywhere, which means we need global cooperation to figure out ethical standards, make sure these technologies are used responsibly. It's a connected world. Data doesn't care about borders. What happens in one place can ripple out everywhere.
A global challenge needs a global response then. What should we be thinking about as we try to navigate this?
Well, we got to go beyond just checking compliance boxes. We need ethical frameworks to guide how we develop and use AI, making sure it benefits everyone.
It's about more than avoiding fines. It's about making sure AI does good, not harm or division, using it to help people, not exploit them or take away their rights.
Exactly. Transparency, accountability, fairness, those got to be at the heart of how we design and use these AI systems.
And people need a say in all this, right? Their voices need to be part of shaping these rules.
Absolutely. It's a team effort.
Mhm.
Governments, industry, researchers, and most importantly, everyday people like you, all working together.
And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive. Thanks for joining us as we explored this crazy world of AI and data protection.
It's been a pleasure.
And for our listeners, if you want to learn more, check out the full EDPB opinion document. We'll have a link in the show notes. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep on diving deep.